Hello, welcome to the Courageous Self-Care podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, I love to talk about all kinds of self-care. So not just the self-care that you hear when you're out and about or reading articles or listening to your doctor. That tends to be self-care that focuses on your physical body. And yes, of course, that's important. And if that's your only strategy, then you're missing half of what self-care is. It's also really important to go internal, find out what's going on the inside. And with that, I've developed 12 courageous self-care skill sets that once you learn them, you're good. You will be a self-caring expert for the rest of your life. And that's one thing that's super important about self-care is it's a mistake that a lot of people make is they try to go about doing it all by themselves. And you're smart because you're here and you're listening and you have figured out at least this first step that you don't have to do it alone. There's a myth of the strong, independent woman who does everything by herself and keeps it all inside. And in my experience, that woman is not really strong and independent. She's just sad and lonely. So you are here. I'm so glad that you're listening. And I feel like it's also important to have other experts helping to guide you on the self-care journey. So today I have my guest with me, Cari Frame. Cari, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Christina.
So glad to have you here. So Cari, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you love to do.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I love to do is my work. I'm a soulful empowerment coach, and so much of what you just said in your intro resonates with me because helping women and men connect to their inner strengths and to really get out of their own way is one of my favorite things to do. I'm passionate about it. And in my personal time, I love being in nature. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing, whether it's active or simply just sitting at the edge of a creek or something, but it's deeply soulful for me to be in nature. And so it's one of those things that I always return to, that I always get really powerful connection from.
That is fantastic. So I'm a little bit curious about, well, not a little bit, I'm curious about how, what I picked up on is the phrase, helping people get out of their own way. So what are some ways that people tend to be in their own way that they're not aware of?
Oh yeah, that's, one of the biggest things that I have studied and built skills around is helping people stop self-sabotaging behaviors. So self-sabotaging behaviors is basically any area of your life where you have goals, you have dreams, you work really hard in that direction, and then for whatever reason, whether it's consciously, unconsciously, we do something to undo the hard work that we have already put in, which basically help us stay standing still. And for a lot of people, this is an area where they're a complete mystery to themselves. In fact, a lot of times we actually think that it's somebody else or something outside of ourselves that is doing this, when in fact, a lot of times it's the choices that we make, the unconscious actions that we take that then undo some of our own hard work and keep our dreams and our goals always at a distance from us. And so the beautiful thing about this is it's something that we can change. It's something that when we get to know ourselves better and bring more true kindness to ourselves, we can undo that pattern and actually start to build on the momentum of the hard work that you're already doing, rather than always redoing it. So it's an amazing process, and seeing people change their lives just through working on that is so rewarding, because a lot of times people think that it wasn't something that they actually had control over, when in fact it's absolutely changeable. And it all starts with self-kindness.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was mentioning in the intro, is that, like, this is exactly internal self-care. You have to go in there and excavate, and it's best if you do it with a guide, because they will be able to help you at least save time in the process. If nothing else, you will save time rather than having to do it all by yourself. And it can be confusing. Like it's like standing in front of a giant painting and having your nose right up to the painting, and you only see this tiny little bit of the picture. And then when you step back and get some perspective and you get someone to help you see the artwork and tell you what it's about and what it was intended and the secrets hiding in it, it makes such a huge difference.
Yes, totally. Absolutely. There's a great quote. I can't remember who it's from, but you can't see the label on the jar when you're inside the jar. Right? And that's what we are. We're inside our own lives, so it's really hard to see that label of what's happening. So having professional help really makes a difference. And you're so right. It saves time, energy, all of those things. Yeah.
Right. And suffering.
Yes.
Yeah. So there was something else that I wanted to say, but it left my mind very quickly. All right. Anyways, so one thing I love to do, Cari, on the show is have guests share their current favorite self-care practice. And I love to do that because, number one, it gives us ideas as listeners. Sometimes what other people do for self-care never would have occurred to us. And other times it's reinforcement that, oh, yeah, that person does that too, and that's helping me. And so I love to share ideas and hear what people are doing. So what's something you love to do that you consider to be self-care right now?
Oh, yeah, that's a great subject. I think my favorite, and it's been a favorite for a long time, but especially lately because I am working from home and I'm also homeschooling one of my children. And so the management of time and energy has been intensified lately, I guess I can say.
Right.
And so the self-care that I've really made sure to practice lately is checking in with myself throughout the day. And I use my breath because it's always there. I mean, I can be at the sink, washing dishes, or I can be in the middle of a lesson with my daughter, and I can still use my breath to check in with myself, feel where there's a block or where there's tension or where there's something pulling me away from this moment. And the breath always brings me into this moment. And then when I need more than just one breath, then I can step away. And even if I'm in the bathroom, I will take 30 breaths or something and just really take that time to pause and connect. And almost always, whatever was pulling me away from the moment or making me feel distracted or frustrated sort of evaporates after those 30 breaths, that extra 2 minutes by myself in the bathroom, because really all the answers are in this moment. And everything that feels like you don't have answers to, it's usually because you're somewhere else other than this moment. So that's the one that I'm really finding beneficial right now.
That is so important. And I love that you bring that up, because breathing really is the essence of life. It's the first thing you check in CPR, right? You can't live without it. And yet it's like this secret, this really well kept secret. And I remember a few years ago, my husband was reading this book called Breathing, and I thought, how could someone write an entire book about breathing? Like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And then I realized, oh, that is very close-minded. And over the years, I've learned so many different ways of breathing and how impactful it is. And it really can change everything in a moment. And it just brings you back to who you are at a soul level, right? Not in the frantic human brain busyness, trying to keep everything in order. It brings you back to your heart center, I think. And so I'm curious, Cari, is there a specific, there's thousands of ways to harness your breath. Is there a specific way that you like to do it that works for you?
Yes. I don't think it's so much a breathing exercise or a specific way of breathing as it is. With the breath, I'm bringing my full attention from inside my head down into my core. And because obviously, you know, that's where the chest is moving, the abdomen is moving. And just by bringing my full attention down into the core of my body and the core of where I really feel things, I am centered. I am grounded in what's really true for me in that moment. And then usually what just sort of happens as a result of that is that the breathing that before that might have been starting kind of like at my clavicle. You know, when you're sort of breathing from the top of your breath and you're not getting a deep breath, but by bringing my attention into my core, suddenly my breathing relaxes, my body relaxes, and my breathing just deepens. All kind of by itself. So I guess that's my way, because if I'm one of those weird people, if I focus on like changing my breathing, I just get more tense. So I focus on my attention and the sensations that I'm aware of, and then the breathing itself just kind of naturally deepens and relaxes.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really shifting your awareness from whatever was going on in your mind into your physical body and noticing what happens there. And that is super impactful. And it brings, you're making another great point that I like to talk about, that so many women say, well, I don't have time for self-care. I am taking care of all these other people and doing all this kind of stuff, and so I don't have time. And in my books, that's just an excuse, because there is always time for a breath. And what I have recently unearthed in my quest to know more about self-care is that self-care is really just self-love in action. It's the verb of self-love. And like you were talking about, self-kindness, and giving yourself even a minute to breathe and connect with your body and get out of your head. That is self-love in action.
I absolutely agree with you. I think self-care gets partitioned into like something that we do, once a day, or hopefully 3 times a week, or something like that, when in fact there is the potential to bring it any moment of the day.
Right.
And I think when it becomes that kind of a practice, then the changes that are possible from self-care go deeper and last longer.
Right. Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So we're going to pause here for a quick commercial, and I encourage you listeners, while the commercial is on, go ahead and listen, and also pause for a deep belly-filled breath, because that's going to be self-love in action, and you've got the perfect time to do it here. So we will be back in just a quick moment. Stick around. Welcome back. We're moving into part 2 of the interview, and in this part, I love to get our guests, my guests, just me, to share a story of courage. And I love the full spectrum of courage. So sometimes we just think of courage as these giant moments where we overcame the greatest obstacle, and those are fantastic. And at the same time, there's also everyday courage. The courage it takes to do something that you are uncomfortable with, the courage it takes to get out of bed, the courage it takes to do something unusual in your outfit, to express yourself more fully and get to know who you are. So the whole range of courageous stories is what shows up on this podcast. And I love to focus on courage. I really feel like the best self-care involves courage. And the reason I love to hear these stories of courage is because courage is contagious. That's what Brené Brown says. And it might be something that we think is so far removed from who we actually are. But as we hear these stories of courage and start to realize, oh, I did something that made me feel uncomfortable, and then I felt amazing afterwards because I moved through that fear, that brings the courage closer and closer and then right into us, so that we realize that we are all actually courageous and we can do hard things and we can do things that scare us, and we live through it and we become even more of who we're meant to be. So with that, Cari, I'd love to hear your story of courage that you're going to share with us.
Okay. Wow. I love that intro too. The courage is courageous. Or courage is contagious. I love that so much. Yeah, so probably like a lot of people, searching for a moment of courage in my own life, I found it a bit tricky. Even the everyday courage, I can find courage in somebody else's life in a heartbeat, but to really find it in my own took me a little bit of thinking. So the one that has been coming up for me on a daily basis is to acknowledge something that I hid from in myself for a long time, which was that I have addictive tendencies. So I had the courage to stop drinking 2 years ago when I first realized that I had the potential for it to be a real problem. It wasn't a real problem yet, but it definitely had the potential. And that took a lot of courage. I sailed through that, and then about 4 months ago, I had the courage to realize that I had actually transferred that addictive tendency over from alcohol to sugar. Mm-hmm. And sugar was something that I've had in my life for, since I was a kid. But to realize that, oh my gosh, I was so proud of myself that I'd overcome the problem of how I was using alcohol, that I didn't even notice that I began to actually double down on how I was using sugar. So having the courage to face that and to acknowledge, yep, I totally have been doing that. Mm-hmm. And it absolutely doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve my physical self. It doesn't serve my soul. And it was really holding me back from a lot of things that I want for myself. So I began my own journey of sort of overcoming sugar. I mean, alcohol, I went cold turkey immediately, and that was not hard. But acknowledging that it's really, it takes a lot of work for me on a daily basis to overcome sugar. It's tough to acknowledge that for myself, but every day I start with, I'm worth it. I'm worth that effort to overcoming all of that, those things that are holding me back, and how sugar basically just helps me hold myself back. And also acknowledging that I'm strong, but I'm also weak, and like that sort of combination of like acknowledging what is my responsibility, and then bringing self-kindness to the practice of building new strength and building new habits. And it definitely feels like courage in a lot of ways, because it would be so much easier. It would be easier, and there wouldn't be any fear around just going back to eating whatever sugar I wanted. That would be so easy. And just going back to being unconscious about the choices that I'm making, and the impact of that on myself. So it takes courage for me to face that. No, I'm not one of those people that can just have a piece of cake or have eat one cookie. Like maybe someday I'll be one of those people, but right now I am not one of those people, and that's okay. And that there's so much more to me than this area that I am working on. Sometimes our problems can begin to feel like they define us. Right. And really just saying, you know what, everybody has problems, everybody has areas of struggle, and not hiding from them, not hiding from my own has taken courage, and the feedback, the positive feedback loop that comes from finally not hiding from it anymore, is makes it so worth it. Makes all of that courage and facing the fear and facing the need for change, it makes it so worth it. So yeah, that's a daily practice in courage, I guess, for me.
Absolutely. Well, you expressed that so beautifully, Cari, and I appreciate you bringing light to that, because addiction often, if not always, has shame and embarrassment around it, so much so that we don't even want to see it for ourselves initially, like you mentioned. And I remember hearing a speaker say one time, we're generally addicted, like human beings are always addicted to something. It might be something that serves you. You might be addicted to green smoothies, or you might be addicted to alcohol, and it may not be serving you. So I think that is a way of practicing self-love and being kind to yourself, and just acknowledging, I wonder what I'm addicted to right now, and is it serving me, or is it something that I would like to change? And I love how you said that it's not easy. And I think that's so important as we get to know ourselves and continue on our personal path. It's so important to acknowledge that often it's the harder choice that's going to make us a better person and is going to reveal more of who we actually want to be. So when we're faced with a choice, there's the easy path, and then there's the path that feels like it has more draw to it. And if we just put a little bit extra effort and call on that courageous muscle that we have, the muscle of courage, we can move down that path with more ease. But I just often find the easy way is not generally the way that's going to serve us in the long run.
It's true. I often think of that, you had the easy path and then the path that has the draw. And for me, it's like, because I'm so connected to sensations in my body, and the path that has the draw, or the path that has more meaning to it, often it has like this like boom sort of powerful feeling in my stomach and my chest, and it's like, oh man. That's the one. And I've been trying so hard not to acknowledge it, right? But when you accept that challenge of, yes, this is more meaningful, yes, it's harder, but I am strong enough. I am like way more than strong enough to handle this that I've been trying to avoid or trying not to acknowledge. And I guess the daily courage part of it is that sometimes that step of, reminding myself that I'm strong enough, that I'm worth the effort and everything, has to be reasserted every day.
Yes.
It does get stronger, and it gets more, it doesn't take as much effort to do, but nonetheless, there are days like, I don't know if this is for everybody, but because I still go through PMS and everything, and the crazy intensity of sugar cravings around PMS time, it's bonkers. It's like I'm back to square one, and it's like, oh my God, I'm starting this whole journey. Like I've been sugar free for almost 3 months now, and every month around PMS time, it's like, boom, I'm a brand new participant in this, and it's like, wow, okay, really have to be extra kind to myself, extra aware, and bringing in all of the things that truly feed me, rather than the things that actually deplete me.
Right.
It's so important at those times, because it's so intense.
And then you also have the, okay, I did this before, I can do it again.
Right.
And that is the benefit of having a little bit of traction behind that courage.
Yes, that's right. It's like, wow, you've conquered this. You have felt the positive effects of being on the other side of this. And that never leaves you. If you really believe in it, you can always return to that strength and that moment of courage and say, it's just rinse and repeat. You had the courage before, you can have the courage again.
Right. Oh, what a great story. Thank you for sharing that, Cari. And you've mentioned so many really important things around self-sabotage, connecting with your body, self-kindness, and I'm sure those are things that you work with your clients on. So I'm sure our listeners are going to be intrigued and interested, and if they want to find out more and connect with you online, how can they, or where can they do that?
With my coaching practice, I have a website which is cariframe.com, CARIFRAME.com. And if you want a little look into your own potential self-sabotaging behaviors or the first step to overcoming that, on my website there is an inner deserve level assessment, because it's been my experience that so much of self-sabotage comes from somewhere inside. You have this idea that you don't truly deserve whatever it is you're reaching for, and so you don't let yourself keep it. And that's where the self-sabotaging behaviors come in. So the inner deserve level quiz begins to get you thinking about that. And then I always offer a complimentary follow-up call after the assessment to really dig into what that assessment was like, what it made you think about, and what it's like to begin to work on that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that generous offer. I encourage you to act on that. And I often talk about how self-care is active. You do need to use your body generally in some way to start doing some self-care, whether it's taking a breath or moving your hand to your mouse or on your computer screen and clicking the button that is in the description for this podcast. You can easily connect to Cari's website. So I encourage you to take action and see where you're at with your inner deservability and self-sabotaging behaviors. So Cari, thank you so much for taking the time to share your self-care practice and your wisdom and your beautiful energy with us. I deeply appreciate you being a guest on the show.
Thank you, Christina, for the opportunity, and I also deeply value the work that you do.
Oh, well, thank you. And listeners, thank you so much for being here. You can give yourself the super secret bonus points and the giant virtual gold star and a pat on the back for listening today, practicing some courageous self-care. And I encourage you to continue to breathe throughout the day, connect with your body, as Cari mentioned to us, and see where you can implement some everyday courage, maybe choosing something that has a big boom in your belly and doesn't seem all that easy for your mind. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved this episode, you can give it a like or leave a comment, give it a rating, depending on the platform you're listening to it on, and share it with a friend. And that way we can get the message of courageous self-care out to all the people who need it. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to connecting with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.